Subversive is the language that you use to describe the way that the Kendrick performance has been characterized by some. I think that if you choose the term subversive, then there's an argument that can be made that a lot of the visual representation, the cultural references, and so forth are subversive. You could make the argument that performing it in that venue in front of Donald Trump on that stage is subversive. But the question that I ask my students, and I'm teaching this hip hop history class, is it revolutionary? Because in the show, he said the revolution will be televised. You picked the right time, but you picked the wrong guy. So that's making a claim that this is a revolutionary intervention. So I actually asked my class, code. Now they've been hearing from me for 5 weeks, so they're likely to kind of understand where I might sit. But I asked them, is this a revolutionary performance? And about a third said yes, a third said I don't know, and a third said no. And then we had a conversation where we unpacked it. Like, what would it take to be revolutionary in that moment? Last week, they watched Fight the Power, the original full-length video by Public Enemy from 1989, which was filmed during a march against police violence in Brooklyn with thousands of Black folks. And Public Enemy's introduction to that video, to that Fight the Power video, was 2 minutes from a documentary about the 1963 March on Washington. And then Chuck Deast came in and said, that's nonsense. We're done with all of that. We're done with all that marching. We're done with that nonviolence. And they came in with the S1Ws, right? Fruit of Islam, Nation of Islam dancers in military formation, looking militant in jet black army fatigues. Now, that would have been revolutionary. to see that kind of performance on that stage would be revolutionary. If you want to tell me that it was revolutionary as a cultural intervention, I'm open to the argument. But if you're going to tell me that it's revolutionary from a political standpoint, the only thing that was revolutionary was the brother that ran through with the Free Gaza and Free Sudan. And my own argument, and listen, I'll be blunt about this. I'm 100% in Kendrick's camp in the Kendrick versus Drake beef. Obviously, right? And I think I said on the presidential campaign, I said Kamala is to politics what Drake is to hip hop, right? It's cosplay blackness. You come through Atlanta when you need a few dollars. You're not a colleague. You colonizer. Like, this is somebody that instrumentalizes the culture. So I'm with Kendrick when it comes to a war for the culture. And I described what Kendrick did as a celebration of American blackness. But in my post yesterday, I said Zulkarnain carried the mantle. He literally held the standard that Black Muslims have so frequently held in this country. People like Malcolm, people like Muhammad Ali, people like the enslaved African Muslim rebels, which literally the Spanish crown and other authorities tried to stop the importation of Black Muslims because they were so frequently associated with slave rebellions. So it wasn't at all surprising to me that the truly revolutionary moment in that performance with 400 people on stage came from Zulkarnain, from a Black Muslim brother who felt it, and he's talked about this, that it was a moral and spiritual and religious obligation for him to speak up in the face of injustice. Last thing that I'll say, again, I'm not going to be one of those people that says, because I saw somebody say, like, Kendrick cosplays a revolutionary, these kind of things. I don't want to take that kind of shot. I don't think that that's warranted given the circumstances. But what I wanted to see personally, I wanted to see him take a knee and raise a fist. The way that, because I have not watched an NFL game from front to back since Colin Kaepernick was run out of that league, and performing on that kind of stage in front of that kind of audience, that's the kind of revolutionary message that you could send. That's that kind of 1968 energy that was there and available and an option and an opportunity. And not everybody is a revolutionary as an artist. But if you say the revolution will be televised, then deliver revolutionary.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Gilsat Heron says the revolution will not be televised, isn't that an acknowledgement, an understanding that something of a genuine revolutionary nature would not be feted, would not be allowed in that kind of a context to begin with?
It will not be brought to you by Colgate. It will not make your mouth fresh and clean. All of those things. That's exactly what he's saying. He's saying that it is not going to be filtered through capitalist media. It is not going to be presented in that kind of format. The revolution will be live. The revolution will be something that you have to participate in. So the question then becomes, is anything revolutionary possible from that stage, from that platform? That's why when you use the word subversive, I was like, okay, I'll give you subversive. My own personal argument, is that the cultural riffs were subversive. Uncle Sam, Sam Jackson as Uncle Sam is
Yeah.
obviously playing. He's obviously playing a character from minstrel performances, and that's what the role he's in that spot, and he's repping it. Um, Nathan Irvin Huggins, one of my favorite historians, wrote this book called Harlem Renaissance, where he said the art of the Harlem Renaissance was trash because it was all performed for the white gaze. And then at the end of that book, he had a chapter on blackface minstrel shows in vaudeville, and he reminded people that the first blackface performers were all black. They
Mm.
blacken their faces further. They use red lipstick around their mouths to draw accentuated lips. They performed a particular version of blackness for the white gaze. And then Nathan Irvin Huggins asked the question, at what point does the mask become the face? At what point does the performance of a particular version of blackness for the white gaze in the culture become inseparable from what Black people themselves see of themselves and their culture? And I wonder where we are in 2025 in that moment, if something that is essentially a commercial performance for a mainstream audience, if that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, so I confess that I wasn't going to watch the game, and then I tuned in at halftime.
Yep.
Um, and so when I started watching it, it wasn't the first time Samuel L. Jackson had popped up in the performance. I think it was later, like halfway through the performance, right
Yep.
around the SZA part. And my first reaction
Go ahead,
was,
say it.
what in the minstrel show is happening here? What is Samuel L. Jackson involved in? And so I'm like, okay. Maybe I missed something. I'm reading all the think pieces afterward. I'm looking at all like the TikTok explainers because as I said up top, I fully admit that I'm not fully up to date on every aspect of what might be going on here in like hip hop beef territory. And
Yep.
I really like Samuel L. Jackson. I have a lot of respect for him. I have a hard time imagine him not thoughtfully taking on a role like this. There's obviously the inflections of the role that he had in
Even
Django,
in Django, yeah.
of this Uncle Tom character, so like he's aware, obviously he's aware. So I was like, I know they don't have a like an unselfconscious Uncle Tom in this situation. Uncle Sam Tom.
Uncle Sam Tom.
But like, I'm sorry, like I'm struggling. I'm trying to have a good faith, like understanding of what was intended. But I was struggling with it because no one, as many of these like 2-minute explainers that I watch on TikTok, I have yet to hear someone explain, and so what? And like, so what am I supposed to take away from it? And so what did it mean? Okay,
Right.
Samuel, it's subversive. It is a play on X. Okay, for what purpose? Is what I'm still waiting to hear. And it hasn't been so long that we were in a world where Rihanna had like boycotted the Super Bowl, right? And declined to be a halftime performer over Black Lives Matter and the treatment of Colin Kaepernick. Cut
Yep.
to the last time there was this face off in the Super Bowl, right? 2 years ago
Yep.
with these same
Yep.
two teams. And she was the headliner. And I'm a little confused as to how we got from there to now. We had Beyonce doing like the the Get Information performance years back, 2016-ish, 2017? I don't remember exactly. And there was all of that imagery with the Black Panther outfits and, all of the post-Hurricane Katrina imagery that she had been using to, rep legitimately the places where she and her family are from and to bring attention to a certain kind of Black struggle. But it all seems to be so distilled and so vague and so superficial by the time it hits the Super Bowl that it does nothing but to siphon away the genuinely righteous objections that people had and boycotts that people had toward the NFL for their treatment of a player for doing a de minimis, frankly, protest.
Yeah. So I'll go back to where you started first with Uncle Sam Tom or Uncle Tom Sam. So I want this to be very clear because I now know, having done political stuff, what it's like to have little sound bites cut out, and then people run with those. So I want to make sure that I frame this right. I'm not saying that Kendrick Lamar's halftime show was a minstrel performance. However, however, where is the line? I think that an analyst could ask between a meta commentary on a minstrel performance and an actual minstrel performance. Those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can have a kind of critique of the form present in the presentation and yet reproduce some of the dynamics of the minstrel show in the presentation. Now, I don't know how to read it. I end up divided on it. I think that it's, a culturally interesting intervention. I would have wanted more, politically. I definitely don't consider it a revolutionary performance. But I don't know that I would go so far as to describe it as a minstrel show. But you've gotten to the heart of the problem. At what point does the mask become the face? At what point do all of these people who have taken these critical stances towards various kinds of Black political issues, at what point are they just taking a check and doing the show and, dancing the way that they're supposed to dance? What's the difference? One could ask. I'm not saying I'm asking it, but what's the difference one could ask between Snoop Dogg and Rick Ross performing at Donald Trump's inauguration and Megan Thee Stallion twerking for Kamala's, fundraisers, and Kendrick performing at the halftime show? In terms of the visual aesthetics of it, in terms of the cultural authenticity of the performance, you could put Kendrick in a different category. But politically, to return to your issue, and this was actually the question that the students asked me, is that some of them had said, that, well, just doing this kind of performance with those subversive elements, United States flag made out of entirely Black bodies, that kind of thing, that's making a political statement. So the question I asked back was, what's the political statement?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the political statement that is being made, except we're here and we're Black and you have to deal with us? So I can read it, and even a part of me love it as a celebration of the culture, as a celebration of American Blackness. But in terms of making a political statement that's transformative in this moment, something that's revolutionary in this moment, that's a harder case to make. I don't see it functioning in that way. The Revolutionary Act, again, was Zulkarnain, carrying a double flag.
Yeah, and I heard him give an interview on, I think, Al Jazeera this morning, and he was so on point as he described his motivations and what he stood for, and so clear.
I felt I didn't have a choice because I was selected to be a part of the halftime show, and when I saw what my position was, it was a great stage, a large stage, and we know as a practicing Muslim, our Prophet Muhammad teaches us if you see a wrongdoing or you're aware of a wrongdoing, you must stop it with your hands. And if you can't stop it with your hands, stop it with your tongue. Speak out against it. And if you can't stop it with your tongue, try to stop it with your heart, meaning pray about it. So I had an opportunity on a grand scale to bring awareness or speak out against a wrong of our Muslim brothers and sisters. So we're spiritually connected in Islam, and we're human. We're connected with empathy for humanity because we're all human beings, God's creation, and they're oppressed, and it's on a wide scale, and nobody is really giving it the light that it should get, at least working toward a change. And I wanted to show the solidarity to those afflicted by this and their families and loved ones, that they're being remembered here in America. And they're being remembered here in America, not just by me, but by others.
in contrast to what I felt watching the halftime performance. But again, I'm open to the idea that I just don't get it. I think Torre, he did one of these clips. Maybe we'll splice a bit of that in. He made the point about the American flag being made out of black bodies and how we're the literal hashtag fabric of the country.
Last night, Kendrick gave us a nuanced discussion of what it is to be black in America. He was saying America is a game and we're all trapped inside of it. The stage was a giant PlayStation controller that the performers couldn't even see the entirety of. So this is like what we're trapped in America, in mass incarceration, in capitalism, in the entire American system. We are trapped in a game that we have no chance to win. And not only that, we can't even see that we're in the game. Like, the dancers can't see that we can't even see that we're in a game. And you got Samuel L. Jackson as Uncle Sam. When do we get to see a black man play Uncle Sam? And we're seeing Sam say, hey, you're being too ghetto, too rebellious. Don't you know how to play the game? For an older black man to say to him, don't you know how to play the game? That is so deeply coded. Like, do you know how to navigate the system? Do you know how to deal with the hurdles that the white man is going to throw at you? Do you know how to do the necessary sacrifices and compromises and code switching that's necessary to get there? Kendrick had been doing his hardcore rap songs at that point, and Samuel L. Jackson is talking about, you're scaring America. Don't you know how to play the game to mollify these white folks? So after Sam says, don't you know how to play the game? Kendrick goes into the softer songs, the R&B. This is when Luther comes out. This is when SZA comes out. And when Sam says, that's what America wants, nice and calm, that's when he's playing the game. So Kendrick switches it up. That's when we go into Not Like Us. But of course, there's a whole game with Not Like Us. Is he going to do it? Is he not? It's like hopscotch. He's in, he's out. He starts to do it, then he backs off. Then he teases that he's going to do it again. Then he backs off. Then he jumps right into it. He's playing a game with you. And the whole Samuel L. Jackson thing is like, no matter how high and big you get, there will always be that voice of America standing there going, you're being too ghetto. You're not playing the game enough. You're not enough. And oh my God, an American flag made of black bodies. So much symbolism, how we are the fabric of America. We are the raw materials that made America. We form America. We are definitely part of America, but also we are trapped in America, right? We got the Drake references with Serena and the A-Chain and the whole he likes to sue. But this was really about, let's critique America. Let's talk back to America. Let's put on our critique of America at the Super Bowl.
There's this point about the choreography, the set looking like a video game controller, and Samuel L. Jackson saying, like, this is a game. And it's, like a meta commentary about how the powers that be are playing all of us. Like, I see it, I get it. And maybe we're asking too much of what it is, a performance at the Super Bowl. But I do think your point of saying, well, if you're going to open it up to saying the revolution will be televised, then I think that it's perfectly fair to have the scrutiny that we're giving here, applying here, asking whether or not this is in fact a revolutionary performance. Now, it's also difficult because this is all happening in the context of the right melting down over this.
They're gonna melt down over, any kind of black people doing anything, so I mean, so
Correct.
that's going to happen, regardless. And I mean, so part of what I heard in what you were just describing was identity politics standing in as politics again, right? That just by showing up and being black in that space, that's political statement enough. And Yeah, nah, because that's not what Gil Scott Heron was talking about, right? That's not what Malcolm was talking about. That's not what Fred Hampton was talking about. That's not what Huey P. Newton was talking about. They were talking about an actual Black revolutionary politics that is about liberation, not just representation. And even if you get back into the, and this, like, happen to be teaching a hip hop history class, as I mentioned, you get back to the kind of origins of what hip hop is doing in the culture, like literally, the first DJs, Africa Bambaataa is, a leader of a street gang called the Black Spades that he then transforms into the almighty Zulu nation, like Afrocentric identification, and takes guys that were beating people up with brass knuckles and bats. This is before guns come into the game, and are now throwing house parties and breakdancing competitions, that you're turning something negative into something that's positive, that it was countercultural even at its root, and that a lot of the political content that comes into the music in the 1980s through a lot of the 5%er rappers, like Brand Nubian, Rakim, you got groups like X-Clan. These are political groups, not to mention Public Enemy, who we've already talked about. So for me, as an old head, and I will confess to this, I am one of those genuine, dyed-in-the-wool, true hip-hop heads from the beginning. So for me, what passes for conscious or political now, which is kind of vaguely subversive, does not cut the mustard for what was explicitly revolutionary political music. Go back, through Dead Prez, and others who were actually making the soundtrack of a revolution. And I will say this is that, I'm a believer in, practicing Muslims. Muslim, one of the things that we'll sometimes say in the tradition is, God ain't done with you yet. What's coming in the rest of your story is yet to be determined. God ain't done with Kendrick yet. Kendrick still has a platform through which, if he wishes to, he can expand on these things. And I think that sitting back, it may be more productive in this moment, even if it's maybe like, Don Quixote, quixotic to do so, to call him into that, to assuming that political role, rather than to call him out for not embracing it in an explicit enough way in this particular moment.
I like that. Let's call him in and tell Kendrick that I didn't cut the mustard.
Listen, I'll tell you this: whoever's watching this, if Kendrick is your people, give me a sit down with Kendrick and let's talk, the history of Black radical music, Black radical politics. And if you really want to make a transformational intervention in the nature of white supremacy, you've got a platform for it. Let's work on the messaging.
I mean, I do think that one thing I will be looking toward is whether or not Kendrick offers any commentary on the Palestine flag aspect of this protest, whether he's asked or whether he offers up that he supported the act, which was done by one of his dancers, or whether he would defend him. The media cycle just in the couple of days afterward was all about what seemed to be a scramble to try to stick that guy with some kind of charge, which they seemed not to be able to find anything, even though they certainly made a Girl Scout effort, a good faith effort. We've
got something akin to the rule of law for another 10, 15 minutes in this country. So, yeah.
Right. So then the question becomes, does Kendrick disavow him? Does he get away with basically saying nothing at all? And what do we take from that, if that's the case? At the moment, it seems like he sort of gets some residual goodwill from the association with that protest moment,
while still maintaining plausible deniability with respect to the contractual elements of the protest itself. And that's really what this, eventually comes down to, right? This comes down to the fact that the NFL is going through everything that you're doing with a fine-tooth comb, to the point that everything that you do is going to have to be formally approved before it gets to the stage, lest they have a political equivalent of Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction, right? So in the end, that was actually where my students landed this morning, was you can't do anything revolutionary from that stage, because that's not a revolutionary stage.
Or maybe you can given the live performance nature of it all, but you have to be willing to never do it again.
Exactly. You have to be willing to deal with the consequences. You have to be willing to deal with, having the Zionist record labels. And I mean, let's just be clear about this. Drake and Kendrick, are both under the same Zionist record label in the end. Drake is suing their, shared label. So in the end, those networks of commercial control that are shaping what hip hop can and can't say politically, those things are very real. And one of my favorite MCs, Wise Intelligent from Poor Righteous Teachers, he said, I think it was 2009 at a Nation of Islam event, Savior's Day event, he said hip hop changing from positive and revolutionary to negative and reactionary was not an accident. It was the product of record label decision makers who were afraid of the political potential of this Afrocentric, politically astute music. And what we have seen ever since is industry plants like Drake, who, as Yassine Bey put it, as Mos Def put it, make music that's good to shop to, right?
Yeah, I remember that clip.
It's good. It's good. He said you're at a Target in Houston. By the way, Yassine Bey, another shout out to Black Muslims and being politically astute, right?
Like, is Drake hip hop?
Why are you doing this to me? Drake is pop to me. In the sense, like, if I was in Target in Houston and I heard a Drake song, it feels like a lot of his music is compatible with shopping.
Commercial music.
Or it's
Music,
shopping with an edge in certain instances.
Fair. I like Drake's music, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
Of course, I mean,
it's commercial, entertaining, fun, good, it's formulaic music.
It's likable.
Likable music, yeah.
It's likable.
But is it? I'm gonna leave you alone. We're gonna move on.
So many products.
So many SKUs.
So many SKUs. Look at all these SKUs. Oh, so many products.
So much merchandising. So many barcodes.
I love this mall. Look at this place. I mean, look at this place. They have everything. Everything's here. They have everything here. Oh, this is great. This is a new Drake. You hear it? It's great. Okay. What happens when this thing collapses? What happens when the columns start buckling? Are we not in some early stage of that at this present hour? Are we seeing like the collapse of the empire? Buying and selling, where's the message that I can use?
Right.
What's in it for your audience apart from like banging the pom-poms?
He said, if I could see myself at a Target in Houston, with Drake playing on the speakers. And again, this isn't where I come down on Kendrick and Drake. That's an easy mark, But would I have loved for Kendrick to say "Free Palestine" instead of just having one of the 400 people behind him run through with a flag? Yeah, I would have loved that. I really would have.
Yeah. Your point about the reactionary nature of not just a certain kind of hip hop, but a certain segment of Black politics really strikes me. It really does feel like if you boil down the point of a lot of stuff that seems sort of quote unquote subversive, the point is sort of like make white people uncomfortable. And even the kind of use of the Uncle Sam Tom character seemed to be geared toward that. I was trying to read, just for people who might not have been following all of this, find like a good faith summary of the version of the case that, no, this is revolutionary. I wanted to read just a little bit of it,
Please.
Just so people can assess it on their own. This is from Screen Rant, an article that purports to describe what we're supposed to take away from the Samuel L. Jackson character. It says Kendrick Lamar's halftime show notably begins with a close-up of Samuel L. Jackson, who's dressed as Uncle Sam. This character appears frequently throughout the show and offers crucial thematic value to the narrative Lamar weaves through his performance. Before diving deeper, it's important to note that Jackson's Uncle Sam character is reminiscent of his role in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. In the film, he played, we know all that, a house slave, blah, blah, blah. It's vital to Samuel L. Jackson's role as Uncle Sam that his character sounds like Steven, his Django character. As in both cases, he's playing a black man who works against his own race in order to thrive in American society. It's also crucial to making this work that it's Jackson, specifically in the role, a man who has a long history of political activism, even serving as an usher at Martin Luther King's funeral, serves to further highlight that Lamar is making a point here. Okay, a point. Let's get to it.
Yep.
Jackson's Uncle Sam character is there to remind and try to enforce what the typical Super Bowl halftime show performers should be like and of what certain sections of America expect from that, offering vibrancy and patriotism in contrast with Kendrick Lamar's subtle and understated performance. This is partially for Kendrick to acknowledge that he is not J-Lo or Rihanna and that his showmanship will offer a measured, more particular meaning instead. Okay, so they're saying that it's supposed to highlight a creative choice that Kendrick is making to have a more measured performance as opposed to the showmanship we associate with the Super Bowl. That I would argue is not political, but okay.
At all.
Okay, yeah. With that in mind, it's easier to examine what Samuel L. Jackson was saying throughout the show. In response to Kendrick's performance of Squabble Up, Jackson exclaimed, "Too loud, too reckless, too ghetto," and "Mr. Lamar, do you really know how to play the game?" His character is intended to challenge Kendrick Lamar's performance, suggesting that the songs aren't proper for a show like the Super Bowl. That he is telling this to Lamar and his dancers, a group of black people forming the American flag, is also indicative of them being told their place. However, rather than submitting to Uncle Sam's request, Lamar continued to deliver tracks that were true to his reputation. Okay. Similarly, this is true of Lamar stating, "The revolution about to be televised, you got the right time, but the wrong guy." As The Atlantic posits, this may be him again reckoning with his own place in America and the expectations placed upon him to make a political statement of some kind here, wanting him to be more of a messiah than a musician. However, it's also apparent in this context that Lamar referring to himself as the wrong guy is countering Uncle Sam's demands, underscored by referencing Gil Scott-Heron's Black Liberation song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." He's saying that he will not just do what Uncle Sam's America wants and play its game.
Yeah, Go ahead. No, keep going. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and then just say, ultimately, Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance is a self-reflective examination of his role as an artist on an entertainer stage, with Samuel L. Jackson's Uncle Sam there to represent the prodding force of American media and politics. To me, just being like, this is how it is, like, white people be like this and black people be like this. And like, white people aren't going to like this and they're going to censor this. And this is like a representation of my anticipated white reaction to this, for some reason played by a black man, but never mind, I don't know that it's doing anything. And I don't know that if it's supposed to be holding up a mirror to society, I don't even know that it's doing that with any particular insight. We got Matt Walsh immediately tweeting, "This is a DEI performance," or whatever. Do we really need the mirror? Like, the mirror's loud. The mirror's screaming. The mirror's running the country.
Yeah,
we know.
We definitely know. And I mean, one could make the argument if one wanted to defend it. I would neither make nor defend the argument that just by showing up, in that way, in that space, that is a revolutionary act. I think at best it's subversive. I don't think that it, there's lyrics about police brutality that Kendrick could have used, from that stage, from his own corpus. There's and again, artists make choices, on the basis of what they want to do and what they think that they can get away with. I'll just say this to return to where we started. Subversive, maybe. Making a statement, sure. What's the statement, and what's the political, what are the political ramifications of it? Again, I think that this falls, to be perfectly honest, into a broader, pattern of, like the way that Black identity has been, co-opted by the Democratic Party and by, kind of neoliberalism in the current, moment, which is just that just by showing up and being included in the story while also being Black, you are doing something revolutionary. And Fred Hampton taught me, that we don't fight, capitalism with Black capitalism. That's not the way that we fight back. We don't fight back with inclusion and getting a seat at a table that is inherently destructive and oppressive. You flip that mother over, and that's that. So again, I have an appreciation and a respect for what for a kind of cultural manifestation and how the culture is going to have a particular response to that kind of performance in a visceral way. But if you're asking about what the political outcomes and ramifications, the political critique, and whether it's revolutionary, I think that conversation takes place in a different register. And I think that slippage is a huge part of the problem with where we are now in Black radical politics. Like I said this when we were on the campaign trail, is that, Kamala is weaponizing Blackness in service of a white supremacist genocide. And I find that offensive to the history and nature of Blackness itself, which is supposed to be a form of resistance against white supremacy. So there are very, very easy ways, and we've now seen a bunch of them, where Black visuals and cultural references can be distorted and utilized for very conservative or neoliberal or even fascist purposes. And so the role of the artist in a liberation struggle is crucial. You're supposed to expand the realm of discourse. You're supposed to push that Overton window. And yeah, again, if this is a first salvo, we'll take it. If this is a final statement, then it falls short of revolutionary for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you landing there, and I also agree. I don't dislike. I didn't dislike it. I don't dislike Kendrick Lamar. This isn't a hate session. It's just he kind of set the bar for himself. With the revolution will be televised line.
No, I listen. Exactly. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Yeah.
No. I was just saying that I'm still waiting. Meanwhile, Macklemore dropped another pro-Palestine song today, so that's happening. This kind of stuff is coming from somewhat unexpected quarters these days.
But that's the issue, right? Is that in the end, who is the mainstream, top of the field Black artist that has said politically what needed to be said about Palestine? My nigga, is crickets. That's what you got. Like that's what you're hearing. And that should tell you something about, how Black identity has been subsumed under democratic politics to the point where people were afraid to say what needed to be said about Kamala, people afraid to say what needs to be said about Palestine. That tells you that whatever any individual performance may look like, the arena itself is a minstrel show.
The only person I could think of, God help us, was Kanye.
Come on now. Sorry, can we just have a quick? Listen? We need to talk about this just briefly.
Please,
I want us to mark the fact that it is February 11th, 2025. Okay, and the wealthiest man in the world can do Nazi salutes, and one of the most famous recording artists of the last generation can just drop everything from his website and put a swastika up on it, and people think that that's okay. I want us to really take stock of how far humanity has fallen in this year of our Lord. I'm a Muslim, but this year of our Lord, 2025, that this has become normal. And it is so easy under these current circumstances to point the finger over there at the bad guy, and Team Blue is dedicated to like making this a Trump issue. Never mind that their Pied Piper strategy is the reason why they got Trump in the first place. Hillary Clinton wanted Trump, and that Democratic Party has spent tens of millions of dollars putting extremist candidates in the Republican place. It's not just the ratchet effect of us following them, but it is literally has been funding and fueling the development of fascism. And I'm telling you, they're going to throw the rock and hide the hand like they always do, pretend like this wasn't a thing that they themselves did, but we all were there. We've all seen the receipts. This is still the Biden-Harris genocide. It's going to, wake me when Donald Trump has killed 200,000 Palestinians. But this morally bankrupt, now DEI liberalism, and I mean that in a different kind of derogatory way, right? It's like literally what the Democrats have now, essentially, instead of policies, is DEI Reaganomics. They just have, neoliberalism, with like a sprinkle of color, mixed into the neoliberal, mix. So what we're getting from them is vitriol, I told you so, victim shaming, victim blaming, every single thing other than accountability. And I said it during the presidential campaign, that anyone that tries to shield the Democrats from the electoral consequences of the evil that their own hands have done is complicit in a crime. And the reality is that they are now trying to assuage their consciences because they made this bed and now we all got to lie in it.
Yeah, I should note, by the way, that Kanye didn't actually really come out for Palestine. He was asked, I think, at some point what he thought about it. And he said, like, don't ask, I don't know enough about that. And I think he threw up an olive tree at a concert at some point last year, but has never actually said anything and ducked and dived away from any direct statement when asked directly.
And he needs help. Let's just Kanye needs help, and we need help from Kanye.
Yeah. I don't know how Britney Spears got under lock and key when all she did was really do some half naked dancing videos in her living room. When Kanye's out behaving the way that he's been behaving.
Somebody need to take the keys from him.
Yeah. Well, Butch Ware, I haven't properly introduced you. You were a professor at UC Santa Barbara.
We did all of that before the introduction. Yeah. Okay.
And additionally, of course, the vice presidential candidate for the Green Party ticket in 2024. I'm so glad to be talking to you again, especially because it is on the heels of your announcement that you are running for governor of the great state of California. How's that going? What should we know?
Let's see, where do you want to start? Here's what I would say to go in off the top. One of the disingenuous criticisms that was constantly leveled at the Green Party during the 2024 electoral cycle was, y'all only show up, every 4 years to run for president. Well, what y'all gonna say now? That's number one. The goal here is to build political strength, to grow from the political coalitions that we were able to establish during this last electoral cycle, and to essentially reconfigure the political map in the United States of America. So we're coming after them. And we made the official website launch. It was a little less than 10 days ago. In between what's come in with pledges from some of our donors and the hundreds of small individual donations, we're up over $110,000 in the first 10 days, raising for the campaign. I'm not playing with these people. And the goal is to build an actual political movement that is capable of defending us against this fascism, because the one thing that we know for sure is that the Democrats either cannot or will not do that. And that party is in shambles, it's in disarray. You see them like, oh, it's their government. What can we do now? All we can, Hakeem Jeffries talking about, we might as well just lay down for the next 4 years. It's their government.
I'm trying to figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
Do you understand now the absolute moral bankruptcy and political, what's the word I'm looking for here? Impotence of this party. They have no moral standards and they have no political resolve or political courage. So the aim is to take California, which is the most progressive state in the union, and to make this a laboratory for the development of a true progressive politics. Now, I didn't say it was a progressive state. I said it's the most progressive state in the union. I saw that smirk come out the corner of your mouth. This is still a state that voted that voted to keep slavery on the books. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in this space. But the aim is to do all of the things that people say that the Green Party is unwilling to do, which is to go block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, build an infrastructure. Because listen, we ran with the best policies for the working class, but this has not been a working class party. We ran with the best policies for Black liberation. This has not been a Black people's party. We ran with the best policies for the Latin community, for the indigenous community with respect to land back and other things. But we have not built the demographic strength in those communities. That changes. And so we are attacking this, with aggressive fundraising. We've had hundreds of people already volunteer to do work in communities, and we've got people volunteering and donating from all around the country, because the case that I've been making is that whatever happens in the state of California is going to irrevocably shape and shake American politics from here on in. California, if the states were each independent nations, California would be the 5th largest economy in the world. If we are able to pass single payer healthcare in the state of California, then it is just a matter of time before we have single payer healthcare in the United States of America. If we are able to turn the governor's mansion green in the state of California, then that by itself will be the end of the duopoly as we have known it. So for all of the people that invested energy either in our campaign or in PSL or in other third-party movements, or even people that just couldn't hold their nose and vote for Kamala, so they stayed home. What we're saying is, you have said, Americans have said, 70% of independents have said, 53% of Democrats have said, 48% of Republicans have said that these two parties do such a poor job that we need a third party to serve as a counterbalance to that power. Well, now is your opportunity to invest in that. But y'all are going to have to put your money where your mouth is, because we're still not taking corporate donations. We're taking donations from donors that are willing to put their name behind it. There's no dark money in this, and we've got some major support, especially from big money in the Muslim community, because again, in this 2024 electoral cycle, the Muslims voted 53% for the Green Party. They voted for the Steinway ticket, 20% for Kamala, 20% for Trump, largely as a protest vote. But what that means, and I think people haven't reflected on this, although I've heard you talk about it a number of times, I think people don't understand the extent to which this is a seismic shift in the history of American politics. Muslim Americans, significant voting bloc. We haven't seen a group opt out of democratic politics like that and just shift independent. So I think that as somebody with roots here in the state of California, with long established community relationships, especially in San Diego and in LA and in Oakland, but also as somebody that's been known primarily as an activist Muslim intellectual for these last 20 years, I think that this is an opportunity for people to get behind a campaign that is obviously has the potential to be transformative in the state of California, but that has a chance to establish a real third-party electoral opportunity in 2028 or 2032 in a national presidential campaign.
It's really exciting for a couple of reasons. One, I'm reflecting on what we were told after Bernie dropped out of the race in 2020. I remember we had a guest on the podcast in the very, very early days who was, I want to get this right, I want to say he was Bernie's like healthcare czar or something like that. He was previously the head of the National Nurses Union. And I had him on in the context of the lead up to Force the Vote. And as a way to have a good faith conversation as to why the National Nurses Union was had come out against Force the Vote, and why what alternatives he saw for the future of Medicare for All in the wake of Bernie's 2020 campaign. Mm-hmm. And at that time, the vision that he presented, which was a real radicalizing moment for me, to be truth be told, was that he said there's like a 20-year horizon that's for Medicare for All. And the way we get there, the trajectory includes Gavin Newsom becoming, heralding Medicare for All becoming a statewide policy, CalCare in California, yep. And then Gavin Newsom becoming president and kind of shepherding it in off the back of California's like state by state achievement. And I remember being kind of flabbergasted at the time, saying a 20-year horizon when we were at the time in the middle of a global pandemic, which was exposing the frailty of our healthcare system and our employer-linked healthcare system in particular, was a tough pill to swallow. But that was that conversation. And then subsequently, I remember having Ash Kalra on, who is an assembly member in California, to explain to him why the CalCare vote failed, to explain to us why that vote had failed, despite having Democratic Party majorities.
Yep.
In the assembly.
They have super majorities. They can do whatever the hell they want. They can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah. And people can go back. I strongly encourage they do go back and listen to that interview and have a better sense of why I am so radicalized and furious and intolerant of Democrats when they come up with excuses for why things can't get done. I'll do respect to both of those gentlemen for joining us on the show, because it was a revelatory learning experience for me. But suffice it to say, I very much disagreed with both of their approaches. So that being said, it does seem like, at least in the imagination of liberals, that California looms large as a kind of test kitchen for progressive politics, even if they don't actually stand by those progressive bona fides. So I want to ask you how you see that happening, given that unlike some other states where there have been some significant progressive successes, like New York, obviously we've had the AOCs and the Joe Palm Obens of the world, and we feel how we feel about the trajectory of those people's careers. But those were states where there's relatively low turnout for those congressional elections, where door knocking can get you pretty far, where there's a well-developed DSA that was able to help them do grassroots outreach. I believe Zohran Mamdani, running for mayor of New York, is able to exploit some of that right now. California is huge. Geographically, population-wise, and it's expensive in terms of running ads. So I hear you saying we need to turn the Green Party into a party that is seen as a workers' party, that's seen as a party for various historically marginalized groups. How do you do that? How much money does it take? How are you thinking about this strategically?
It's going to take $30 million to run a competitive campaign in the state of California, which is the reason why fundraising, especially in the Muslim community, which has people that aren't part of this community don't understand the kind of disciplined traditions of fundraising. I gave a speech at Isla for an Isla event. Isla is a mosque on Crenshaw and Slauson, in South Central, and I was the keynote speaker for a fundraiser, their annual fundraiser. We raised $1.1 million that night for Isla, right? So this is a community that knows how to put its money where its mouth is and has disciplined structures. For years, I've been keynote speakers in other people's fundraisers. And what I've been asking of this particular community, and this has to be a nationwide fundraising effort. If you're listening to this and watching now and you're committed to transformational progressive politics, that's why I said you need to put your money where your mouth is. But I do know that the Muslim community will do that because they did that for the Stein Ware campaign, and they've already started that process, just in these 10 days. So I'll just give you just some simple numbers. Before I joined the Stein Ware campaign, in the 10 months before I got there, the Stein Ware campaign had raised $1 million. In the 2.5 months that I was on the campaign, we raised twice that. And the reason is that we were able to make those connections with those Muslim fundraising networks and to get established relationships with those communities and buy-in from the Muslim community. And my aim is essentially to say to the Muslim community, we now have an opportunity to play a role of moral and ethical and political leadership in a broader anti-imperialist coalition, in the only nationwide political movement that is capable of securing ballot access and actually doing damage to these war criminals and fascists that are our only two choices right now. So the first part is that the fundraising has to be serious. And I went to Green Party National Steering Committee meeting, Green Party California meetings, and said, we have to step our fundraising game up. Y'all have been content to just be on the field and in the game. If the survival of humanity is at stake in leaving these warmongers in power, then we need to play harder than that. We need to be organizing to win. So that means that we have, and that's why I've started the campaign and building the infrastructure, because the primary is in June of 26, which is not that far away, right? And this is another one of those cases where the duopoly has rigged the system. It's a primary where only the top two advance. So it's designed to keep third parties out. But one of the beauties of that liberal/progressive reputation that the state of California has is that there are as many registered independents in the state of California as there are registered Republicans. So this is an opportunity to make an appeal that is not just targeted towards the so-called left. And I want to be explicit and clear about that, is that I'm coming for not just the Bernie Trump voters, I'm coming for Trump voters. I'm coming with for everybody that understands that we are dealing with a system that is run by and for the corporations rather than by and for the people. And that we have a very narrow window of opportunity where we can try to, using what is still left, the vestiges of American democratic representative institutions, while we still got them, is the last chance that we have to wrest control back from this oligarchic regime. And when I say this oligarchic regime, I'm not talking about Team Red. I'm talking about blue and red. There's no substantive fundamental difference in the corporate ownership of those two parties. And we, the people, are at their mercy unless and until we stand up and stage a whole ass revolution. And literally in the first email fundraisers that went out, it's like, this is not a time for reform. We need a revolution, because healthcare should be a human right, not a stock option. Right? Single payer healthcare. Do you know these Democrats passed single payer healthcare when Schwarzenegger was in office because they knew he would veto it? And then as soon as they had that governor's mansion and majorities and super majorities, suddenly miraculously they can't get it through.
Right.
Because, and the last time they almost got CalCare through, and a last minute $1 million donation to the Democrats from the insurance companies. And just like that, it was off the table. So this is corruption. You look at the situation in the aftermath of the wildfires. You got Karen Bass, mayor of Los Angeles, handing over the rebuilding, her rebuilding czar is a former a police commissioner and real estate developer. What says carceral state/corporate sell-off better than that? I can tell you what says carceral state/corporate sell-off better than that. They talking about running Kamala for governor.
Yeah, I did see that.
So these are people that can't get right because they don't want to get right. Go ahead.
What do you think? How is the field shaping up outside of winner Kamala Harris taking another bite of the apple?
I mean, listen, so I reviewed the field before, we filed the official paperwork, and got everything in. And I'll just put it like this. Um, Betty Yee, the comptroller, an interesting, personal biography, not a compelling or charismatic figure. If they run Kamala's likely to clear the field of the rest of the Democrats. That's really not saying much. These are not, talented, political athletes, as the saying goes, because they have essentially had a monopoly on political power. They don't have to be any good at anything. They just have to follow orders that come from the party, and then they're going to get promoted through the relative ranks. So I think that, well, let's just put it this way: nobody on that list has been on the Breakfast Club. So I like my chances, and I like my chances to communicate in a way to the people of California and to the broader American public in a way that people understand is authentic and is actually rooted in a desire for our collective liberation. And the one thing that you are never going to get from me is playing politics or selling out.
Yeah, you were a star on The Breakfast Club. You guys did amazing on The Breakfast Club, and I was going to actually ask you next about how you're feeling about the media field. I mean, you say, I think correctly, that if Kamala is the chosen one, she will be anointed and you will see her all over every television screen, and that's a lock for them. I also hear you saying you're going for those conservative voters and independent voters in the state, which I think is wise and good. But of course, they have their own sort of media mechanism. And while conservative media tends to be more friendly to kind of left independent candidates than mainstream liberal media, it's up to a point. And up to the point at which you present a real challenge as well. They're not just doing it like out of the goodness of their heart. And we saw that a little bit with the kind of hot and cold on even RFK Jr. throughout the Republican primary. So that being said, I hear you saying that you think that this door is still open to you at the Breakfast Club. I'm curious what it's been like for you with any left independent media. TYT is based in California. Do you feel like there is kind of a receptive attitude toward the left commentary, who in my experience, has been historically rather cold to Green Party politicians?
When you say
the establishment left independent media, the Young Turks, Majority Report, for instance, that cohort.
I think that I'm going to get from that particular cohort. I think that I'll get a hearing, and it'll be up to me to make a case and to make an argument. And I'm confident, in my ability to do that and to meet this particular moment. The reason is relatively straightforward. One of these well-placed donors in the Muslim community. I asked him at a point in time, I was like, the way that I talk, that doesn't sound too crazy to you? Like, you're somebody that's doing very well, from a kind of class standpoint. And he said, no. He said, if you study history, people always underestimate, the ruling elites always underestimate how close the people are to revolution when wealth inequalities reach the kind of scale that they currently operate at. Only someone that is truthful and incisive in the way that they attack those wealth disparities is actually speaking to the reality of the moment. And my theory of the case, again, I like, people have taken issue with the Green Party for fair and for unfair reasons, right? And everybody wants a coalition of the left. And why can't you you join forces with Claudia and Karina, or listen, people have invested lives in building and developing political parties. You don't talk somebody off of, their life's work. What you have to do instead is you have to set a pace. And what I think it needs to be done is that we need to actually build an organization that's capable of winning, that's capable of actually showing movement in electoral returns. People will respond when we demonstrate strength. And that's going to have to come from fundraising. It's going to have to come from voter registrations. And it's going to have to come from producing electoral results. But I'm going to tell you this, is that if we are able to get into that top two in that June 2026, I like my chances, because especially if it's up against Kamala, because Kamala is more exposed on a bunch of fundamental issues that are the principal weaknesses of the Democratic Party than any other candidate. And with that as the other option, I guarantee you that I will be pulling those independent voters. I guarantee you that I would be pulling those Bernie Trump voters and those Trump voters. So the fight for our lives is the fight to finish in the top two in June of 2026. And if that happens, all bets are off.
Yeah, you're making me actually think, as we're talking about the media in California and how it all works, you're making me recall Larry Elder, who was a radio personality himself. I wasn't familiar. Sorry, yep. I wasn't familiar with his work as a commentator before running for governor, but who did surprisingly well, would you say? Maybe it wasn't so surprising as a conservative candidate. California has a long history of people from different sorts of backgrounds and entertainment and the like throwing their hat in these races and doing relatively well and really leveraging sort of their notoriety for political gain. It's a little bit different, obviously.
Is that a Schwarzenegger reference? Is that
Schwarzenegger, Reagan?
Sure. I mean, for the record, and send this out, print this for Joe Rogan and the whole right wing manosphere. But at age 50, I hit a 225-pound bench press for 30 repetitions, which is defensive tackle numbers at the NFL Combine, 405 squat by 17. And unlike Schwarzenegger, it's all natural. So that's number one. And number two, on this particular point, listen, DC was my original hometown. Grew up on the south side of Minneapolis. When Jesse Ventura, as an independent third-party candidate, won the gubernatorial mansion in 1998, and in a lot of ways, that's the most relevant and pertinent, example, a similarly progressive political environment and an outside the box type candidate. And I can tell you this, right now, with respect to Jesse Ventura beat me in notoriety. I've never been part of the WWF or the WWE, although I could. I'm just going to I could absolutely handle mine in the WWF.
What is this confidence? What is your sign? Wait a minute. You had a birthday just before the election. What does that make you?
Scorpio, man.
A Scorpio. Oh,
of course.
But I have... Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Well, so there's a couple of things on this. So first, to finish the Jesse Ventura point, is that I absolutely believe in my ability, to communicate more effectively than Jesse the Body Ventura. Secondly, now with respect to the question that you raised, so I was a former minor league baseball player. My father was a locksmith with a 6th grade education, and I got a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. I have had to believe in myself and bet on myself in the most adverse circumstances throughout the entirety of my life. And the being born in the circumstances that I was born in and finishing a PhD and teaching at these top research universities, the odds against that when I was born are longer than the odds against me winning a gubernatorial race in the state of California. What I've already overcome to get to this point, hasn't had the impact on the rest of the world, but we need that kind of confidence, because to be perfectly honest, if you don't believe in your capacity to do it, who else will? And that was one of the issues, that I thought was both unfairly and fairly raised, is that the Green Party has both unfairly and fairly been criticized for running to be a part of the race, to win the issue and not necessarily to win the election. When I'm playing something, I'm playing to win. And this isn't about my ego or my confidence. It's literally about if we are going to have collective liberation, basic equity, if we're going to have rights for everybody, if we're going to have, justice in housing, if we're going to have healthcare as a human right, then we have to have people that are willing to stand up and fight for it.
Look, I cannot say enough how much I appreciate your energy and your framing this as a fight to win, not just a fight to be represented or to get a message out there. And I've spoken to many people in the wake of the 2024 election about how much they similarly appreciate your energy and what it's brought to left politics generally and to the Green Party specifically. The even like the waitlisting stuff, being like a regular guy, like, I don't want to get bogged down in some of this like crisis of masculinity discourse, which can't end well. But I think there is something to be said for there being something appealing and authentic, let's just put it that way, about your approach. And I'm here for it. And I'm really curious to see, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that I think a lot of folks felt burned by Bernie. And he demonstrated in one hand that you can raise enormous amounts of money from grassroots. And then on the other hand, that it can be a waste of your money if you feel like you were ultimately betrayed, and then all your money, time, and effort was ultimately funneled back into the Democratic Party. And so people who once would have given, I think, have been sort of sitting on their hands in their pocketbooks for the last few years. And I am curious to see, and I frankly would like to see people consider this race as a new test ground for that mode of fundraising, but wholly outside of the Democratic Party, where there aren't those same risks.
And it has to be. Oh, sorry. No. Well, I was just gonna say it has to be wholly outside of the Democratic Party, and you, I mean, enough about me to understand, that my read is almost always directly informed by Malcolm's read. I converted to Islam when I was 15 years old after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that was both the initiation into what became my own personal spiritual faith tradition, but also into Black radical politics. And Malcolm said, the white liberal is the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere. Now, he said that in 1963 when white conservatives are turning fire hoses on Black kids and hanging people from trees and killing white protesters that are riding for civil rights. Malcolm says in that moment that the white liberal is the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere. And Malcolm was saying that he said that the liberal is a fox. It hunts by guile. It bares its teeth. You think that it's smiling at you, but it's there to eat. The conservative, it fixes its mouth into a vicious snarl, so the Negro has no illusions about where they stand. What he said about the Black community being stuck between these two predators, essentially now the entire American populace is stuck between these two predatory parties. One, a party of foxes that pretends like it's there for the people, but is really there to extract from the people, to keep people in positions of eternal dependency so that they stay exactly where they are. And we are seeing now what the naked snarl of those fascist wolves really looks like, right? In efforts to just essentially strip everything off the government that isn't bolted down and turn it over into private hands. If you don't have the nerve to fight under these circumstances, what are you waiting on? Do you think you are going to get another opportunity to fight? Do you think that you can continue to entrust this fight for our survival to Team Blue, which has shown you time and time again that as soon as you actually threaten the corporate interests of their party, they will break you on a rack like a medieval torture system. And that's what they did to Bernie, to get him supple and compliant, to where he's saying crazy stuff like Joe Biden is the most progressive president since FDR. He said that just the other day.
Wait, he said it again?
No, this was yeah.
Oh,
yeah, no, he said it after. He said
Bernie, unforced error.
He said it after the election. He did say it after the election. It was a couple of weeks ago. So this is the kind of insanity. What's that definition of insanity, right? It is repeating the same actions and expecting a different result. Y'all keep putting your hopes and your eggs in this Democratic basket. And then, oh my God, they sold us out again. It's like, who could have predicted it?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of, I just recently had the head of Our Revolution on the podcast. And, I was frustrated by his again, I don't mean to mischaracterize anybody. People should go back and listen to the episode. But what I felt was a sort of naive hopefulness about the new DNC chair and the accountability that the Democratic Party was willing to take for losing this election, and that he would be better than the old boss. And I asked him, whether or not he thought his role as the head of a ostensibly progressive organization that was founded out of the Bernie movement was to endorse the least bad. He said it was like a kind of a lesser of two evil. Like
lesser of two evils.
He didn't use that language. I'm using that language, to be clear, but. They were saying that Ken Martin at least was better than Ben Wickler, and that Ben Wickler was the corporate candidate, and at least he got defeated. He was the one that Nancy Pelosi and everybody else were behind. So the fact that Ken Martin was still saying there's good billionaires and I'm happy to take their money, it was still a victory that he was elected over the alternative. And I said, well, as a head of a progressive, ostensibly left organization, why is it your job to be weighing in on any of those candidates? If there's a genuinely progressive one, or at least like a Faz style Bernie guy, why not throw your lot in with him? Why even be opining on this lesser of two evilism? And like, what's the deal with our revolution? This is kind of giving me a crisis of confidence in the organization as a whole. And I followed up by asking some questions about whether our revolution would support Green Party politicians. Like, why are you even playing in the muck with these Democrats anymore? Yep. Haven't you learned your lesson? And he said, yes. Right? He said that our revolution is supportive, or would be supportive, I don't remember the exact tense used, of independent candidacies as well. And so I wanted to ask you whether or not you had heard from or are planning to do any outreach to groups like that who do have a demonstrated history of being at least with the Bernie left. And also like the DSA, because I'm thinking again of Zohran Mamdani in New York, and how there is this excitement among even the establishment left, the TYT majority report types, about his candidacy. And I think rightly so, by the way. I'm a fan of his.
Yep.
But it does seem to me like there's a support for people who are kind of looped into the DSA circuit, rightly, for better or for worse, than people who are in the Green Party. And there was obviously at times overlap between the two. I have spoken to, for example, Shama Sawant about being both in Socialist Alternative, and she was a card-carrying member of DSA. I don't know if she still is, but for a long period of time. And these not being mutually exclusive, warring factions like the Jets and the Sharks. But it does feel that way in terms of the way the political commentariat gets behind some people, but not others. And so I wanted to know what your experience was with them, and whether or not you have any sort of hopefulness or plans about working with these groups.
No experience or contact, with either of those groups to this point. Open to having a conversation with anybody that is serious about transformative, progressive, radical politics from anywhere on the ideological spectrum. We're taking converts, at this point in time. Having said that, and I'm just going to be blunt about this, I made 2 predictions on the campaign trail, only 2. I never said that we would get to the 5%, never made any predictions of any kind except 2 things. Last week in August, I've been on a campaign for a week, and I said that the Democrats have no path to winning this election because they have lost the swing states, because they've lost the Muslim vote in those swing states. And people looked at me like I was crazy and that I was talking out the side of my neck. But I was fully vindicated by that. There was no way that there was any path to victory. And I'm just going to say something about that because it's related to my second prediction. The Muslim vote is never coming back to the Democratic Party for the same reason that, listen, you don't vote for people that genocide you and then tell you that they're not genociding you. Or that you should vote for them because the other guy is going to genocide you harder. That is finished. So the Muslim American vote has departed from the Democratic Party, and it is never coming back. And the weak performance that the Democrats have had with other minority communities, in the African American community and in the Latin community, is expressive of a profound malaise and disaffection at the way that the Democratic Party has talked a good game about those communities, but served those communities in no way. The wealth gap between Black families and white families accelerated more in the Biden 4 years than they had in the Trump 4 years before that. The dependency politics of the Democrats have been absolutely toxic. And that's part of the reason why Black and Latin men have tapped out on those parties quicker than Black and that party than Black and Latin women have, because in a society that essentially privileges men only as breadwinners, like that feeling of being put in a position where you are actually not positioned for success and that people do not have your best interest as, you know, a human being and as a working person at heart, that's a departure that is not going to be fixed. So now that brings me to my second prediction. And you had a show about this where you did an interview with a historian about the fall of the Whig Party. And I said that the Democrats are going the way of the Whigs. They are never going to recover from the stain of genocide that they have covered themselves with and from the corporate sell-off of the party. And I stand by that prediction. The Republicans were getting 2% of the national electoral vote. And 8 years later, Lincoln was in the White House.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because the Liberal Party of that time, the Whig Party, was completely incapable of making a simple, basic moral stance on the fundamental question of their time. Is it okay to genocide a people through slavery? It depends. Who's going to vote for me? Who's not going to vote for me? Who will I offend in this? And the Republican Party emerged out of a bunch of different abolitionist parties as the strongest party to make that stance. Well, we emerge as the strongest party to make the stance that our red line is genocide, and that you don't get do-overs after genocide, and that the genocide is a symptom of a broader sickness that has come with the corporate sell-off of this party. And that's the reason why it ain't no jobs left in this country. It's the reason why it ain't no health care. It's the reason why it ain't no housing, that the sickness has expressed itself in that foreign policy. But we have been rotting here in these United States of America because of these people's corruption and their inability to serve as even surface opposition to fascists that would consume us whole. And my bet, again, to bet not on myself or my ability to communicate, but on us, that our collective liberation as Black people, Latin people, working people, that we will see that we have no other choice except to organize. Go back to Malcolm. Malcolm said, we are not outnumbered, we are out-organized. And Malcolm also said, never let your enemy tell you how many of you there are. If they tell me that we can't win this, I say, let us organize, and we will find that out on election day.
Butch, that's the energy I'm talking about. I'm in. Look, all I have left to ask is how are we going to get around you being a Scorpio? Because that's the only real obstacle that I see before us. No, hear me out. I have a whole theory of the case. I was at a birthday party for one of my friends last weekend, and I was going through this because I was like, when will the Dems learn they got to stop running these Scorpios? Biden, Scorpio. Kamala, Scorpio. Hillary Clinton, a Scorpio. Now look, some of my best friends are Scorpios. This is not an indictment of the value of Scorpios, but my contention is that part of why people didn't trust Hillary Clinton, why they didn't trust Kamala Harris, and why they only trusted Joe Biden for one term was because there's just a little something secretive about a Scorpio. There's like an inner world, an inner life, sometimes I would say a bubbling resentment that fuels some of my dear Scorpio friends. And the public just doesn't know what to do about it. Abraham Lincoln, he was an Aquarian. But people love an air sign. Trump, a Gemini, generational talent, gift of gab. You know what I'm saying? Obama, Clinton, Leos, fire sign, leaders, authority, charm. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, this is not, of course, a reflection of my feelings about them as political leaders or their moral merit. But, you know, all I'm saying is maybe we need to do your full chart so we can see what we're up against and work around it.
I can tell you what my full chart reading says. Visionary evangelist is what it comes is what hits on my zodiac analysis. And all I'll say is this: I'm very much a Scorpio, but the least secretive person you'll find. The me that is in class, and the me that is at the gym, and the me that is on the Breakfast Club, and the me that's on this conversation is the same person. And part of that just has to do with the fact that, like, if you live your life in truth, then you never have to worry about getting your story straight. I'm always going to be the same person. And I understand some of those Scorpio tendencies that might have, you and some other folks, reticent. The one thing that I'll just say is that, I've talked about the fact that my mother's a white woman, but I was also raised by Black women. And Black women have taken some of the edge off of some of those Scorpio traits. They beat
the Scorpio out of you.
I didn't say that. I said they took the edge off of some of those Scorpio traits, including, raising, four Black daughters, to maturity, and going through that, process, with them. So, I hope you won't hold my sign, against me, and that you will, allow, we'll paraphrase King, to be, allow my candidacy to be judged by, the content of my character rather than the content of my horoscope. But in all seriousness, I mean, what you're going to get from me, listen, I was minding my business, teaching and organizing and posting about Palestine and leading protests and speaking, in public, settings. Had no idea or vision of entering into politics. And then Jill Stein called me and was like, would you like to consider running for vice president? And I took that as a sign that where I could make the most impactful and effective intervention is by translating the things that I've done through my whole life into this environment. And my goal is to try to live up to the standard that was set by the people that I take as heroes, the Malcolm X's and Assata Shakurs of the world, and to bring that kind of energy into American national politics. And again, I won't believe that it can't be done until I see that it can't be done. Up until that point, I'm going to be organizing and I'm going to be finding strategies to actually get us to victory, because I actually do believe that our survival is dependent on it. The American empire is in decline. And what happens to the American republic when it loses its empire is very much an open question.
Right on. I will be magnanimous and not judge you prematurely. I will also point out that we have had 6 Scorpio presidents, including James Garfield, who was an abolitionist, I believe, and one of the good ones. James Polk, Warren G. Harding, John Adams, and Theodore Roosevelt. Lesser Roosevelt, but we'll take it. So you're down but not out.
down but not out. Yeah, and I had some former Trump supporters that I converted to the Green Party, cause during a cross country flight. I may be the 7th, one day, Lord willing, the creek don't rise, 7th Scorpio president. But being the first, Muslim American, that would also be pretty auspicious. And now to return to, I'm realizing now I got to go to get off onto this other call. As I mentioned when we started, the brother Zulkarnain Nantambu, who literally bore the flag, was representative of a long tradition, of Black Muslims being people that were willing to stand up against injustice, against long odds, and being willing to sacrifice everything and fight the good fight, regardless. So those are some of my heroes. They're not all Muslim. Many of them are. Others were Christian and others were agnostic. But bearing that responsibility of like fighting the good fight, like we are under circumstances of drastic, oppression and extraction, and we have to fight. We cannot, like Hakeem Jeffries just said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. They got the government. Like we have to fight.
What leverage do we have? What leverage could we possibly have? It's like a Larry David skit. What leverage do we have? And insert Seinfeld credits. Yeah, it's really ridiculous. And again, I appreciate your energy. I appreciate your courage. I appreciate your willingness to fight. And I know that the audience feels the same way. Butch Ware, where can people find more about your campaign and find you on the internet and beyond?
butchwareforgov.com, and that's the number 4. Listen, volunteers are important, but we need donations also. The volunteers are great, but in order to build an organization that's actually capable of winning, we are essentially building the infrastructure from scratch, and we are competing with corrupt people. So go to butchwareforgov.com, hit that donate. Even if it's only $11, then that's something that allows us to put a couple of monthly donation commitments is going to allow us to get, a field organizer in the hood in Santa Ana. It's going to allow us, to get a field organizer in Oakland. Like, this is your opportunity, to help us build, a genuine resistance. And without it, let's face it, we're doomed. So we need this fight.
Thank you again, Butch. Thank you to the audience for listening and for supporting this podcast as well. You can get additional episodes of Bad Faith Podcast every week on Mondays at patreon.com/Bad Faith Podcast, in addition to the free Thursday episodes and the free clips from the Monday episodes, which get posted to Bad Faith YouTube. As always, take care of yourselves and keep the faith. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/Bad Faith Podcast. That's patreon.com/Bad Faith Podcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.